Do you want to be joyful in every aspect of your life? Maybe you're even wondering, what is the inner works of my mind and my body? Well, on this week's episode, we're going to review Inner Engineering by Sadhguru. So why did I pick up this book? Honestly, anybody that is interested in meditation or in their spiritual journey, for sure you're going to come across Sadhguru. And that's what happened to me several years ago. And after watching a couple of his videos, his talks, and just the thought pattern that he has with certain things of the world, it thoroughly intrigued me to pick up his book and really dive into it. And it did not disappoint. I really liked the way that he actually structured the book. The first half is really his story and how he found, let's call it, his enlightenment or spiritual journey. And the second part, he really breaks apart every single element that you should really look into to really get into that spiritual awakening of yours. And he starts off with the mind, your body, the energy, and your joy. And if you follow certain tricks that he gives within this, or just his mentality and his reframing of society, if you follow these, you're going to be somebody that's a lot more joyful. So these are the 5 best ideas that I got out of this book. FYI, I'm wearing this scarf because I'm cold. So let's jump into the 5 best ideas. The first best idea of the book is responsibility. And this was actually my favorite one out of the 5. And the reality of the matter is because you are responsible to respond to what happens to you in life, no pun intended. And I'm just going to read one passage right off the bat that's going to get you a better understanding of what he means over here. So all that is required is for you to realize that you are responsible for all that you are, all that you are not, all that happens to you, and all that may not happen to you. So when you take yourself in a position of, I am responsible to whatever happens to me in my life, it puts you in a position of power. So even if you're going through a difficult moment and you're not like, oh my God, life, why are you doing this to me? Why is it this? Why me? Why not somebody else? But instead you shift your mindset to, all right, what can I do within this situation? What am I responsible for? You're going to become so much more empowered. And he even gives the example over here of when you're angry. When you're angry, that's actually your responsibility to take that decision of, do I want to be angry or not? And if you do take that decision of, I am angry for X, Y, and Z, it is your own decision. And in fact, that decision is actually killing you within yourself, because science have shown that if you are in a high level of anger, there's so much toxins within your body that really secretes. And he even mentions over here, which I'm going to say thoroughly, reactivity is enslaving and responsibility is freeing. So that's really what it comes down to. Understand that if you take responsibility for anything that's happening within your life, you become free. And that power that is given back to you, that you're allowing yourself to get back, you're going to be able to go through any difficult moments within your life with this mindset, which is being responsible for anything that happens to you. The second best idea of the book is food for fuel. Now, I appreciate that he talks about this, and this is definitely a subject that's kind of heavy on the aspect of the diet culture, and everybody has an opinion on it. And it is interesting the way that he kind of weighs about the food aspect. And he starts off by saying, anybody that's under 30 years old, having 3 meals a day is something that definitely is good for you, or that could be sustainable for you. But he's like, anybody that goes above 30 years old, 2 meals a day is something that could be better. And he actually explains that the mind is the most effective and the body is the most effective on an empty stomach, which kind of makes sense. So essentially he's talking about intermittent fasting over here. But unfortunately he doesn't talk about any studies. Actually, throughout the whole book he mentions certain things, but he doesn't prove out any type of studies. But everything he says makes sense. Anyways, to my personal opinion, everything he said did make sense. And one thing that I liked about this aspect that he talked about the food, he actually mentioned certain of the foods that we eat and how long does it take for it to pass within your whole system in your body. And I'm just going to name the ones that he mentioned over here. So he talked about raw meat. He says that raw meat takes anywhere between 70 to 72 hours to pass through your system. Cooked meat, it takes 50 to 52 hours. Cooked vegetable, it's 24 to 30 hours. And uncooked vegetables, it's 12 to 15. And finally, fruits, they're an hour and a half to 3 hours to pass through your system. So it's interesting that he kind of explains it over here, and he talks about the aspect of being vegetarian or being carnivorous or being both, or whatever the case is. And what I understood reading this, he really is open to the aspect of understanding that you have a body. So the diet that is the best for you is the diet that works the best with the body that you have. So for somebody, maybe vegetarian diet is best, maybe vegan diet is best, maybe carnivorous diet is best, or maybe just intuitive eating is best. So it really depends upon what your body reacts to. So I really did like that he kind of mentions it and tells about the elements of the food and to really utilize it as a fuel source more than anything else, because if you eat healthy, you're gonna get so much more energy to do what you need to do throughout the whole day. The third best idea of the book is universal intelligence. Now I thoroughly love that he mentions this in the book, because really there was one sentence right off the bat that I read, it kind of shocked me, and not in a bad way, just kind of a shock of like, wait a minute, what does he mean? And I'm gonna go ahead and read this sentence for you guys. Right now you are just trying to use a limited section of your brain and you think that that is intelligence. Now when he said that, I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Where does he go with this? And he explains that most of the people think that intelligence is just within your brain and within your thought patterns. But there is a universal intelligence. You have to understand that there's intelligence within everything. Within a tree, within a rock, within a pebble, within the cosmos in this beautiful universe. And once we understand that every single creation, including ourselves, has this intelligence, there's a better connection that happens. And as he goes forward into his thesis over here and his understanding, it kind of makes sense, because if you just take a step back and think of quantum theory, which is something that we don't necessarily understand everything about it and it's thoroughly interesting, or we just look at, I don't know, black holes in the universe, which is something that we know is a huge part of an energy within the cosmos, but we don't know much about it. We have to humble ourselves and take a step back and think, wait a minute, there is this divine intelligence, and the way that we could find our divine intelligence is going within. And as you go through that, you kind of unlock other levels of intelligence. And this is my personal understanding behind it. And I'm kind of saying this like unlocking other levels of intelligence like it's a video game, but that's thoroughly what happens. So we have to position ourselves to be humble enough to understand that the level of intelligence that we utilize is very minimal at this point, and there's another level that we could unlock essentially. The fourth best idea of the book is love. Now I thoroughly like that he explains this, because he starts off by saying that often he gets asked the question of, is there such thing as unconditional love, and can it exist between two human beings? And he goes ahead and he explains that in fact love is a quality. It's not something that you necessarily do. And if you have to put a condition on a love, then it becomes actually transactional. Now granted, this could be a positive transaction, but it's still transactional. So if you have to be in love, then you're not necessarily being in that situation. And he goes ahead and he actually explains the English expression of falling in love. It kind of says it in that, right? It's not climbing in love, it's not going in love, it's not like flying in love, it's falling in love. It's something that you feel that is happening. So it's not necessarily the action, it's what you're feeling. And he even explains that love is not something necessarily that has to be between two people. You could be completely in love with life itself. You could be in love with yourself. And I really enjoyed this part because it makes us think of love as a different level, because the way that society kind of shows it right now is being in love with somebody, which is thoroughly okay, but there's higher levels to that. So I really did appreciate seeing the different levels of love that are accessible for us. The fifth best idea of the book is self-realization is the key to life. Now, he explains over here, if you want to go and reach the peak of your consciousness, it demands every single iota of energy that you have within you to hit that. So that's why we have to work on our self-realization. And you might be wondering, like, what is self-realization exactly? And furthermore, do we really need it? Because really what we need is success, love, happiness, an abundance of money and health, right? So then why do we need self-realization? And one example that I'm going to personally give is really understanding that if you have a computer, or if you have something and you don't know it thoroughly, you're not using it to its fullest potential. Let's use, for example, an iPhone, right? I'm sure your parents have a smartphone, and unfortunately, they only utilize a certain part of it because that's the knowledge that they have. And then in the other part, maybe you have an iPhone and you use it as well, but you don't know it as much as somebody that works at an Apple store. And then they come up and like, hey, do you know that you could do this and do that with your iPhone? And you're like, oh wow, look at that. I didn't utilize it to that level. So this is where it kind of comes into play. And he gives another example of like a piece of plastic. Nothing special about it, but there's some people that take that piece of plastic and do surfing with it. They have realized the maximum potential of that piece of plastic and made it into a surfboard, and they utilize it in such an amazing and magical way. So where this all culminates for us is we have to understand how our body, how our mind, how our spirituality really works. And once we understand that at a very high level, then we'll be utilizing it in levels that we don't even see and know that are possible to us right now. That's why self-realization is extremely important for every single individual. The word of the book. The word that I picked for this book is esoteric. So what does it mean? Designed for or understood by the specially initiated alone. So how we could utilize it in a sentence is, to live a life of empathy is not some esoterical principle. So it was an interesting word, and this is the one for this book. So did I like this book? Honestly, I really did enjoy it, and I was actually quite surprised how this book did challenge me. I thought that I had a thorough grasp of spirituality, if you could even say that, or meditation, which I still believe that I do have a base foundation, but there were certain things that he was saying in this book that was challenging me because I was trying to understand the way he was explaining it on, like, what does he mean exactly from this? And more I read his thesis or his idea behind it, it became more and more clear. So this is definitely a book that is accessible for everybody. So I definitely suggest you guys to go pick it up if you are interested within this. The Amazon link will be in the description below. Furthermore, if you do see that there is some value in this channel, do not hesitate at all to like and subscribe, to leave comments, to share it with your friends. And I'm gonna leave you off with this. Leaders are readers.